because otherwise we're not going to get these ads done. You tell them to approve the ads. So, look, let me just show you a few pictures to give you a sense of the man and the ads. And it's not a slide presentation. I know well enough not to show a lot of slides. It's in a dark room after lunch. Here, let's get these dates right here. Here he is at 27 years old. This is 1938. He's coming to the U.S. to study U.S. advertising. And he was a tall, thin, handsome guy with bright red hair. The first ad that he really wrote was Guinness Guide to Oysters. His agency was set up to do a lot of British imported goods, and Guinness was one of them. And the copy, and he said, how do I make Guinness come alive and be interesting, associated with things that you eat with it? So you have the Guinness Guide to Oysters, the Guinness Guide to Cheeses, the Guinness Guide to Game Birds, and how do you add interest to Guinness? And that was a big successful campaign, and it was full of a lot of quirky copy that I can't read to you. It's in the book. But the ad that put him on the map, you probably remember, is the man in the Hathaway shirt, 1951. That ad ran in one magazine, The New Yorker. It sold out every Hathaway shirt in New York. There was nothing wrong with his eye. It was Baron Wrangel. On the way to a photo shoot, David said, how do I make a shirt ad come alive? I've got to put some story appeal in this ad. So he stopped off at a drugstore, and for a couple of dollars he bought an eye patch. He said, shoot a couple of pictures with this. And he said, I knew I had something. Well, people started to show up at black tie events wearing black patch. Other advertisers started putting eye patches in their ads, even for a dog food. The New Yorker, in which the magazine campaign was running, actually parodied the campaign in their own pages. There was one cartoon of two guys, three men, standing in front of a haberdashery window where the ad is there with all the shirts. And they're looking at that ad with the shirts, and panel one, they go into the store. Panel two, they come out, and all three are wearing eye patches. So that was a great success. The next success, as I say, was Commander Whitehead, a red-bearded guy, physical fitness buff, coming off this plane, looking like a British diplomat. The copy said, bringing the secret elixir of Schweppes to the United States. He said, you know what was in that briefcase? That was my bathing suit. He became known all over New York. Taxi drivers would turn around and say, you Mr. Schweppes. Gary Cooper asked for his autograph when he went to Hollywood. But nobody drank gin and tonics much. And for a long time, people started drinking gin and tonic. And the only tonic that was available for a long time was Schweppes. It was a great success. The next one was for Rolls-Royce. The most famous headline in the car business, at 60 miles an hour, the loudest noise in this new Rolls-Royce comes from the electric clock. That ad ran in 2 newspapers and 2 magazines, and they didn't dare run it again. Rolls-Royce didn't have enough production to fulfill the demand. So David, of course, turned to somebody else and said, imagine if General Motors or Ford hired Ogilvy and Mather. Those are all well known. Anybody mentions David Ogilvy and those ads, they're associated. But his biggest success, by far, is the one very few, if any, people associate with him. And that's Dove. Suddenly soap is old-fashioned. Lever Brothers came to him and they said, we have invented this new soap that is pH neutral, not acid, not alkaline, and what do you do with that? And he said, I don't think anybody's interested in that. So he did some research and he confirmed that the proposition was a neutral soap was not interesting. So he went to the chemist and said, what's in there? And they said, stearic acid, and 25%. He said, could I say it's one, which is the same ingredient as in cleansing creams, deep cleansers that were popular at the time. He said, could I say it's 1/4 cleansing cream? I said, yeah, you could. So 1/4 cleansing cream doesn't dry your skin the way soap can. Launched that product in 1955. That is now, Dove is now the largest selling cleansing brand in the world, bigger than anything from Procter & Gamble. Far and away his greatest success. And you see all these new Dove products come out, and they all started with that. So here he is in the early 1950s. He's in his 40s then. He was handsome, typically with a pipe. This time he's wearing a tweed suit, his ads behind him. David was an actor. That's one of the things I really learned out of this. And he dressed for his parts. Sometimes he dressed as an English school teacher. When he first came to New York, he sometimes wore a full-length, black, red-lined, scarlet-lined cape. People thought he looked like Heathcliff coming off the moors. He would show up at black tie events wearing a kilt before anybody had ever seen a kilt outside of Scotland. But he dressed his part. He had a sense of entrances and exits. He was a riveting speaker. Nobody left the room when he was speaking. He knew how to do it, and he always got a lot of applause. And at the end, if he didn't think it was quite enough applause, he'd go. And the next day, the papers would report that he got a standing ovation. In 1973, he retired from the business, and he bought the Chateau de Tufu in France, and he spent the last 25 years of his life there. It's a grand chateau. Parts of it were built in the 12th century. It has a moat around the side, a dry moat in which the prior owner kept a wild boar. And it was a new, larger stage for him. You see, it was just like the actor, and he needed a larger stage. We had meetings there, and he had visitors there, and all kinds of stuff. And here he is at the age of 75, in 1986. That was taken at the chateau. And the photographer is Eddie Leibowitz, the famous editorial photographer. I said, for his 75th birthday, by that time I was running the place, and I said, we need a picture of David. Everybody tried portraits, and everybody hated the portraits. Somebody started to try to bust, nobody liked that. I said, how about a photograph? That was the American Express photographer who was doing an American Express campaign for the American Express card. And I said, will you go over to France and do a picture of David? She said, sure, for a certain amount of money. So I spoke to David. I said, now listen, David, this is not Car to Ottawa. This is an editorial photography. He said, that's fine. Well, she showed up and said, how do you want to be photographed? He said, in a carriage with 4 horses. He said, why don't you put on these old clothes and stand by the tool shed? They fought for 2 days. She left in tears. But we got these great photographs. But I knew I had, that's all the slides. I knew I had a great subject. But I didn't realize when I started this process that I had a great story. I really hadn't come to grips with it. He was born in 1911 in England. Scots English heritage. His mother was Irish, Scots Irish. His mother was Irish, his father was a Scot. And he was sent off as a very young boy to a place called St. Cyprian's, one of the terrible English boarding schools that the Brits used to send their kids to at 8, 9, and 10 years old while they went off to run the empire in the army or in the civil service. And they were run, these schools were off in the country, and they were run by a headmaster and his wife. And if the wife was a motherly type of person, that was fine, but if she wasn't, he was hell on these little boys. Well, one of his fellow students, not at the same time, was George Orwell, and the headmistress at
St. Cyprian's was Orwell's model for Big Brother in 1984. So, but he made it through St. Cyprian's, and he ends up at the Fettes School in Edinburgh, English, Scottish school. In England, people say, Tony Blair's school. That's Tony Blair. The main building of the Fettes School was a model for the Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Witchery, J.K. Rowling. Lives in Edinburgh. So he made it through that, and he ends up at Oxford, Christ Church College in Oxford, and that was awful because he was not meant for academia. He was sick. He had terrible mastoid problems. Had bandages. You know, before sulfur drugs, they had to hollow out the infection from the bone behind your ear. He had his head in bandages. He fought with the teachers. He would show up late in classes and in these big amphitheaters. He was coming down, and the professors stopped talking to call attention to him. And Ogilvy looked at the professor and said, "If you insult me like that, I shall not return to this class." So he didn't last long then. But then so he left. Now, he said forever, he said, I failed every exam. I was sent down. It was the worst mistake in my life. Well, I went to Oxford, and I went through Christ Church files. There's no evidence he failed any exams. And there's no evidence he was thrown out. He dropped out. But that isn't as good a line. Remember the actor? He didn't say, I dropped out. I was sent down. It was the worst mistake of my life. In any case, he left Oxford. So in this improbable journey, what does he do next? He becomes a chef in Paris. The Hotel Majestic, which was then perhaps the best kitchen in Paris. I checked the Michelin guide, and he, worked at least under this imperious chef, this petard. Great ovens are lining the wall. He said by 10 in the morning, I was drenched, and he worked hard, and and what did he learn? And these hot-tempered Burgundy chefs that swearing at each other and throwing food, it was quite a scene. He said, I learned standards. I learned high standard. I learned, Petard would say, my David, what is not perfect is bad. High standards. He also learned management. How do you control this group of chefs? And he learned that stuff. He wasn't going to be a chef all the time, so he then, on this little odyssey, he goes to, becomes a salesman, a door-to-door salesman of Aga cookers. You know what Aga cookers are? The Rolls-Royce of cooking stoves. So at the depths of the Depression, he's selling this Rolls-Royce of cooking stoves to Scottish housewives, door-to-door, and he becomes the most successful salesman. And what did he learn from that experience? He said, no sale, no commission, no eat. That left a mark on me. But he was so good that the company asked him to write a sales manual for their other salesmen on it. And it was, Fortune magazine said later, wrote that it was probably the best sales manual ever written. I'm going to read you just one line out of the sales manual for other salesmen. Stress the fact that no cook can make her Aga burn more fuel than 4 pounds a year, however stupid, extravagant, or careless she may be, or however much she may cook. If more fuel is being consumed, it's being stolen, and the police should be called in immediately. So he wasn't going to be a stove salesman all his life either. So he takes that sales manual and he sends it to his brother Francis, who was then running a pretty good-sized agency in London, and he gets a trainee job there. He's there a very short time.